There's a room, it's empty. A single wooden chair sits in the middle of it, fitted with leather straps and a metal cap. On the wall behind it, a small, almost bureaucratic sign reads "Silence." No one is sitting in the chair. No one ever appears in this painting. And yet Andy Warhol painted this image, or some version of it, more than any other single image in his entire career outside of Marilyn Monroe's face. This is Little Electric Chair, and the more you look at it, the less it looks like a painting about death and the more it starts to look like a painting about us. Let's start with what's obvious, because even the obvious here is stranger than it looks. The image is a silkscreen, a mechanical, repeatable printing process that Warhol adopted in the early 1960s, specifically because it removed his own hand from the work. No visible brushstrokes, no painterly flourish, just an image transferred, almost like a photocopy onto canvas. And the source photograph isn't some generic prison interior, it's the actual execution chamber where Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were put to death in 1953. A married couple convicted of passing atomic secrets to the Soviet Union in one of the most sensational espionage cases of the entire Cold War. Their execution was front-page news across the country, and this room, empty, waiting, photographed for the wire services, became one of the defining images of that era. Warhol didn't invent this chamber. He didn't even invent the fear attached to it. He found it already circulating in newspapers a decade earlier, already loaded with a decade of American political anxiety, and simply picked it back up. Look at the wall behind the chair. That small placard reading "Silence" is real. It was actually mounted in the execution chamber, presumably to instruct witnesses. But once you isolate it in a painting, hang it in a gallery and print it in bubblegum pink or acid green, that word stops being an instruction and starts being something closer to a threat, or a punchline, or both at once. Some art historians read it as the painting's real subject, not the chair, the silence. The silence of the state carrying out a killing with no fanfare, no violence visible on camera, nothing but an empty room and a polite little sign asking everyone to stay quiet about it. Timing matters here more than people realize, and so does repetition across an entire career, not just 1 year. Warhol first painted this image in 1964, folding it into what's now called his Death and Disaster series, a body of work built entirely from appropriated news photographs, car crashes, riots, suicides, tabloid tragedy. Then, remarkably, he returned to the exact same image 7 years later in 1971, producing an entirely new limited series of 10 screen prints, each one recolored, recomposed, and re-released to a public that had, by then, moved well past the Rosenberg case itself. That's worth sitting with. This wasn't a single reaction to a single news cycle. Warhol kept coming back to this room for the better part of a decade, as if the image itself had some unfinished business with him. And notably, his return in 1971 landed just 8 years after New York carried out its final execution by electric chair in 1963, at a moment when the death penalty itself was undergoing serious legal and public reconsideration across America. In some states, that same method of execution is still legally in use today. Warhol was famously cagey about interpreting his own work, but on this series, he did leave one real clue. He once said, describing his method across the Death and Disaster series, "The more you look at the same exact thing, the more the meaning drains out of it, and the emptier and somehow better you end up feeling." That's a startling thing for an artist to admit about his own subject matter. Not that repetition reveals meaning, but that it actively erases it. And once you know that was his stated intention, the entire electric chair series stops looking like a single haunting image and starts looking like a controlled experiment in exactly how much horror the human eye can be trained to stop registering. He didn't paint this once. Across the full run of prints, he rendered the same chamber in wildly different color combinations, sometimes hot pink, sometimes pale blue, sometimes almost entirely black, the image barely legible, swallowed by ink. Show someone an image of an execution chamber once, and they feel something: shock, discomfort, maybe grief. Show them the same image 10 times in 10 colors across a gallery wall, and something strange happens. The horror doesn't build, it flattens. It starts to look like wallpaper, like a product line. Warhol had spent years working in commercial advertising before he became a fine artist. And you can feel that background here. He understood better than almost anyone that mass repetition is exactly how newspapers, and later television, actually trained the public to look at violence over and over until it stopped registering as violence at all. There is no body anywhere in this series, not once, across every version Warhol printed. Just the chair, just the room, just the sign. Some critics have argued that's precisely why it works. An empty chair doesn't just represent someone who has already died, it represents someone who is about to. It leaves a space open and your mind, almost against your will, fills it in. You picture yourself sitting there, but look closely at one particular print from the 1971 series, and there's something even stranger. A sweep of pale colour rising diagonally from the base of the chair up toward the top corner of the frame, almost like a figure or a spirit caught mid-escape from the machine itself. It's the closest thing to a body this entire series ever shows you, and it isn't a body at all, it's just light or paint, doing something that looks unmistakably like a soul leaving a room. One last, uncomfortable detail before we close. Individual prints from this series, along with the original 1964 painting, have gone on to sell for enormous sums, some individual prints reaching into the tens of thousands of pounds, with complete 10-print portfolios commanding well over 100,000. A set of images built from a newspaper photograph of a killing has become one of the most actively traded print series in contemporary art, which means the work's final irony might be the strangest one of all. A piece built entirely around the idea that repetition drains meaning from violence has itself become one of the most repeated, reproduced, and commercially valuable images in art history. Warhol, it turns out, may have been the only artist who correctly predicted exactly how his own warning would be ignored. So the next time someone tells you this is just an empty room with no meaning, look again. At the sign, at the empty seat, at the 10 different colours he felt he needed to try, at the sliver of light escaping in just one of them. Some silences, it turns out, get louder the more times you repeat them.